Hello everyone and welcome to Southridge. If this is your first time joining us in this format, we want to offer a few tips on how to make the most of this experience. Be sure to crank up the volume during the music and sing along. Musicians, download the music charts below the video, grab your instrument and play along. If English isn't your first language or you experience hearing challenges, we encourage you to turn on the closed captioning on this video. You can also download the transcripts for this morning's message if that helps you follow along. And be sure to download the Southridge app. This is the latest way to stay connected and informed about everything that's going on here at Southridge. It's completely free and super easy to use. It's great that you've joined us online today. Whether you're checking us out for the first time or simply aren't able to join us in person for any reason. That said, if you live in the Niagara region, we'd love to invite you to join us whenever you're ready and able at any one of our 3 Niagara locations. We'd love the chance to meet you face to face and get to know you. But for the next hour, I invite you to engage with this experience just as if you were with us, surrounded by a community of diverse, curious, open-minded and inclusive people, all desiring to tap into the power and presence of God together as we worship, pray, listen, laugh and grow. There might be some things we do or say today that really resonate with you, and that's great. There might also be things that stretch and challenge you, and we think that's good too. Ultimately, we encourage you to engage openly, thoughtfully, honestly, and wholeheartedly, trusting that the God we are here to connect with is a God who, above all else, is love. So as we begin our time together, wherever and whenever you are, whether this is your first time with us or if you've been around forever, we hope that for the next hour you feel like you're among friends. Welcome to Southridge. We are glad you're here.
God of ages, be my anchor, be my light and be my shield, be my strength and my confession, be my song and be my victory. In my battles, I'll remember you will keep me in perfect peace. You are faithful, your defender. You are good, and you will always be. You have set me free, changed this heart into your home, and ever I'll be with you. I'm back where I belong. I will live to see love invading, grace unbroken. Ever I'll be with you. I'm back where I belong. Let my life broken hearted, lift your heads up. Come to Jesus, come back home. He is greater than the fears you face. You are loved, come home where you belong. You have set me free, change this heart into your home, and ever I'll be with you. I'm back where I belong. I will live to see love and reign, grace unbroken. Ever I'll be with you. I'm back where I belong. Ever I'll be with you. I'm back where I belong. Ever I'll be with you. I'm back where I belong. Let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, 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 let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, 'cause you are good, you're good. Oh, 'cause you are good, good. Oh, 'cause you are good, you're good. Oh,
You're never gonna let me down. 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 You're never gonna let me down.
'cause you are good, you're good.
In Luke 15, Jesus tells the story of a rich family in a state of disintegration. The youngest son, who for reasons we're not given, decided home was not where the heart was anymore, and so demanded his share of the family's inheritance, then took off for a distant land, breaking the father's heart and leaving his brother to carry double the weight at home. He ends up squandering every last penny and soon finds himself lonely and alone, so poor he wants to eat out of a pig's trough and longing to return to his family. So he gets it in his mind that perhaps if he pleads and grovels and begs, promising to do and be better this time, he might be allowed to come back home. Not as a son, of course, but as a hired hand. However, verse 21 says, "When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And his heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him, and kissed him." The son tries to launch into a speech of how much he'd done wrong, how big of a mess, how unworthy he was, and offering to trade in his sonship for a job to earn his keep. But the father would have none of it. Cuts him off mid-sentence, essentially saying, "You're my child. Always have been, always will be. Now come and step back into who you are." And many, if not all of us, have a mixed up narrative that we tell ourselves about who we are. How we don't measure up, we don't belong, how we aren't enough. And we carry that weight around like baggage. But that is not how God sees us. That's not the truth of who you are. So we want to pause right now and try to do our best to set some of that baggage down together. So to help with that, I want you to hold your hands open on your lap right now. And maybe hold them like you would as if you were about to actually carry something. Now, we often encourage you to close your eyes in these kinds of practices, but this time I actually want you to keep them open and just focus on your hands there. And we're going to think about what we're carrying. So, for you, what are the stories you tell yourself that somehow make you feel less than? Whether they're words you've heard or mistakes you've made, specific experiences you've had, or even just thoughts that sit inside of you. We're gonna give an open minute or two now for you to just have that conversation with yourself. And as specific things come to your mind, imagine each one of them landing there in your hand like a rock, and then just hold it. So let's give that a try. In the story, when that banged up son came home carrying all that inner baggage, the father had only one reaction, right? Enthusiastic love and a leaping to restore his child's identity. That's the heart of God for you, because that's the truth of who you are. And those things that you're holding in your hands right now, you don't have to carry. God isn't asking you to carry them. We here in this community don't want you to carry them. You are not your past mistakes. You're not your worst failures. You're not who people say you are, not the issues you wrestle with. You're not your inability to change. Those things are not who you are. You are loved. You're held. You're whole. You're way more than enough. And God is standing in front of you with arms open wide, desperate for you to drop those rocks and just be loved. So I'm going to pray in a minute, and as I do that, if you want to put these things down, then let your hands become part of your prayer, and together we'll turn them upside down and choose to let them go, trusting God to do the work inside of us to make it real. So God, we don't want to carry around lies of unworthiness, of unbelonging, of not being good enough. We just want to be at home with you and with each other. So as we turn our hands upside down now, we pray that by your Spirit, you would indeed set us free from all of the lies of who we're not. so that we might open our eyes and our hearts and our hands to who we are, in you and to you and through you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I am much more than what I've done, more than what I've lost or what I've won. I'm more than what I celebrate, and more than all my hurts, 'cause I'm loved by the one who gives infinite worth. Every time I look for love where it isn't found, I become the prodigal, lost and far from home. And every time I fail to see the gray, I become the older brother, offended by your grace. Never let me go, never let me go. Jesus, never let me go, never let me go. When I was lost, afraid, and I could barely see, never once did you stop looking for me. I was still far away when you ran with open arms, not caring I was dirty, touching on my scars. Never let me go, never let me go. Jesus, never let me go, never let me go. Jesus, never let me go, never let me go. Jesus, never let me go, never let me go.
Now that we've tried to drop the baggage of who we're not, I want to read just a tiny bit about what God has already said of who you are straight from Scripture. And I want to read these words over you. So I'm going to say you are, but as you try to take them into your heart and your mind, and if you go back later to read them again, which I hope you do, try to take them in as I am. So you are chosen. You're known. You're loved. You are free. You're a masterpiece. You are a new creation. You're Christ's ambassador. You are joyful. You are gentle. You are strong. You are secure. You are alive. You are unashamed. You are held by the power of God. You are more than a conqueror. You are the light of the world. You are a child of God.
His love for me. Oh, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Free at last, He has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me.
Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
We are a diverse community of imperfect people.
Who see the church as less of something to go to and more as a life to be lived and shared with others.
We are continue growing in what it means to love one another.
Fighting for unity rather than fighting over unnecessary arguments.
We are living to serve this world in the way of Jesus.
Serving those in need and those on the margins.
Knowing that friendship truly makes a difference.
So if you're coming with questions or curiosities,
Hurts or frustrations.
Joys or celebrations.
Wondering if the church can bring clarity or hope, or simply be a place to belong.
we invite you to be at home with us.
We invite you to explore with us.
We invite you to grow with us.
And we invite you to belong with us.
Welcome to Southridge. We're glad you're here.
Hey there. My name's Mike Minema, and I serve as the Welland location pastor here at Southridge. We're so glad you're participating with us this week, and I hope that this has already been a meaningful experience for you. I'm standing here in our Welland location, and if you've never joined us for one of our in-person gatherings at one of our physical Southridge locations, we invite you and would love to have you consider joining us in person when you feel ready and able. While we're so grateful to have this online platform to share in this experience from wherever and whenever we find ourselves, we love it even more when we can gather together in person to embrace the magic of community. So please know that you're welcome to join us any Sunday in person, and we'll strive to quickly help you know that you belong, especially if you've ever felt excluded or ignored by the church. We'd love the chance to change your experience and to let you know that you're loved, accepted, and welcomed with us. In fact, if you happen to live in the Welland area, I'd love to personally invite you to our location, and I'd be thrilled to have the chance to meet with you and help you decide if you want to join us. And if you live in or near St. Catharines or Vineland, in those areas, I know that you'll find the same welcome at those locations too. Now, for any of you who are brand new to all of this and may be participating with us in this online service for the very first time ever, we definitely want to say a special welcome to you. It's good to meet you, so to speak, even through the screen. And we're so glad you've chosen to check us out. We hope you feel like you're among friends and family, even in this format. As our way of saying thanks for joining us for the first time, we'd love to give you a gift of our Southridge Jam from our social enterprise, the Southridge Jam Company. If you click on the New Here or the Gift button below and shares a little bit of contact information, we'll be in touch and safely will deliver a jar of Southridge Jam to you this week. Similarly, if you're looking for a way to get in touch with us, to meet with a pastor, ask any questions, maybe get baptized, learn how you could get involved in our community, take a moment to fill out the Connect card on our website or the app, and we'll be in touch with you this week. For those of us who call this community home, one of the ways we practice togetherness is by expressing our gratitude to God and our generosity to others through our regular financial contributions. This is one of the ways we can invest in our lives, in what God is doing in and through our church community, making a difference by meeting the needs among us, across our region, and around the world. All of our online giving options are available on our website, and so if you're able to give this week, we invite you to do so with a spirit of joy, generosity, and we thank you in advance for your faithfulness. Now, to help you stay aware of more opportunities to engage with our community or to get involved, check this out.
Well, thanks again for joining our Sunday service. And maybe right in this moment, you would welcome a conversation about what you just experienced. Looking for a chance to unpack what you heard, to describe how you're feeling, or to process how this relates to your day-to-day life. If that's you, know that you are not alone. There are others of us who regularly feel the same way. In fact, there are others across our 3 locations who are joining a Zoom call in the next few minutes right after this Sunday morning premiere to actually have those conversations. It's a great opportunity to meet some people, share experiences, and consider what God might be teaching all of us. Just click the Conversations group link below, and you'll be welcomed by facilitators who will make some introductions, help us all feel at ease, and facilitate a meaningful conversation about the service. We hope you'll take us up on the invitation and join the conversation. Hope you can join us.
Now, we want to transition into this week's talk. And as we prepare to hear it together, we invite you to remove as many distractions as possible and to listen in to what God might want to be saying uniquely to you. We're so glad you've joined us, and we look forward to growing together.
When somebody asks you to introduce yourself, what is it that you say? How do you most frequently identify who you are, what it means, to be you? A lot of times if we're in public environments, the proverbial sitting on a stranger or sitting next to a stranger on a plane, hopefully you're not sitting on the stranger, but next to the stranger on the plane, the typical question that often gets asked is, so what is it that you do? Kind of the idea embedded in that is that something core to our identity has to do with the contribution that we make economically and culturally to society, that we are at some level identified with our productivity. That's not always true, though. I think sometimes, and this is in a lot of environments online, even in people's bios, that people like to identify them as themselves as so-and-so's spouse and father to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. There is this sense that a fundamental part of my identity is connected to the people that I am in ongoing relationship with. I was in a meeting once And it was led by an indigenous man who asked us to introduce ourselves. But he said, I want you to introduce yourself in a very specific way. I want you to first tell me who your grandparents are and what land they were connected to, what land claims them. And then tell me who your parents are and what land claims them. And then tell me who you are, because he explained to us in indigenous cultures, it is often the case that our identity is not primarily rooted in what we do or the relationships of our immediate family. Our identity is rooted in who we are from and where we are from. But what if I were to tell you that there is something fundamental to our identity, to who we are, that comes from a completely different perspective altogether? What if I were to tell you that some part of your essential identity is rooted in your relationship with God, and maybe even specifically in your relationship to the Ten Commandments? We introduced this series last week, and we started to talk about what the Ten Commandments are and what they aren't. And we specifically said the Ten Commandments are not like rules that we have to follow to earn God's love and approval. That's not what these are. We talked about how the Ten Commandments are not a comprehensive Christian morality that tells you what to do in every scenario. It's more of an aspiring vision for the kind of person you want to be. The Ten Commandments are not the sort of zero-sum game that either you get perfect on this quiz or God is going to fail you. That what I said last week is that the Ten Commandments are kind of analogous to wedding vows that we make with God. That rooted in God's unconditional saving love for us and our unconditional grateful love for God, they are an aspirational vision of who we want to be for God, who we want to be as an act of love to God. And they capture the shape of that who, that identity, in the way they describe what it looks like to love God and to love people as an act of covenant love to God. They are, at their core, a description of who we want to be. And I think the passage we're going to look at this morning, in some essential way, unpacks that idea a little bit more of what the who looks like by exposing the fact that our identity is intimately tied to the way we live in relationship with God, especially to the degree that we live a Ten Commandments-shaped life. In Exodus 19, verse 5, I read this verse last week. I'll read it again. It says, "So now, if you faithfully obey me and stay true to my covenant, you will be my most precious possession out of all the peoples." Did you catch that relationship? God says to Israel, if you will faithfully obey, if you will stay true to this covenant of love, then you will become. That our identity at some essential level, in some foundational way, is rooted in our covenant faithfulness to God. It's not dissimilar to the analogy that I used last week. When I, in 2004, stood at the altar and exchanged vows with Krista, I became her husband. And it did change something fundamental about my identity, to be in covenant relationship with Krista. When in 2006 we had our first child, I became dad in a way that fundamentally changed who I am because of my relationship with this child. When in 1997 I agreed to become a pastor in this church, it fundamentally changed who I am because of my covenant relationship with this community. Our relationships change our identity. Now, only to the degree that we live them, not to the degree that we claim them. Right? Like, it's not exchanging vows with Krista that that makes my identity Krista's husband, or a part of my identity as Krista's husband. It's not calling myself dad that makes me fundamentally a dad. It's not signing a work contract that fundamentally makes me a pastor. It's not the degree to which I commit to these things verbally. It is the degree to which I live them with my life. Before I was a pastor, I graduated from the University of Waterloo as an electrical engineer, but that's never become a part of my identity because I immediately went to seminary and started working at the church. I never lived my engineering identity, and so it's not a part of who I am. Our identities are formed not by what we say they are, but by how we live them in the world. I become a dad by lovingly fathering my daughters. I become a pastor by loving the community. I become a husband by loving Krista. If I were to not live these identities, they would not be identity to me. Right? If I were just to decide, I don't feel like living as a husband to Krista, I would very quickly discover that I'm probably not going to be a husband to Krista. And the same is true in our relationship with God. We're not in covenant relationship with God in an essential way because we prayed a prayer once when we were a kid, or because we got baptized at one point in our journey, or because we have a certain set of beliefs about who God is and who we are and who Jesus is and so on. We are in covenant relationship with God. That becomes a part of our identity in as much as we live it. And so what is the identity that we live into if we fully obey and are faithful to the covenant of love with God? Well, in Exodus 19:5, that passage we already read, it tells us that we become God's precious possession. In Hebrew, that phrase simply means we become God's property, God's personal or private property. Which doesn't actually say a whole lot, because the Bible tells us that the whole earth is God's and everything in it. Everything is God's private property. Whatever you drove to church today is God's private property, or whatever you're watching, whatever screen you're watching the service on is God's private property. God owns the whole earth and everything in it. So what it means is that we are God's personal possession in a way that other things aren't. In fact, the verse actually says, out of all of the peoples, we will be God's. We will be God's treasured possession. We will be God's prized possession. We will be the apple of God's eye. We will be the crown jewel of God's collection. We will be something special and significant and deeply personal to God, in the way that God says to us, you are mine. It is a deeply personal, deeply loving identity for God to say, you belong to me. If you read through the verses around this one, there's 7 times in those verses that God uses personal pronouns, I and my and mine and me. God is talking about how deeply and personally God has been involved in loving Israel into freedom from slavery, and how personally and intimately God has brought Israel to God's self, and now how deeply and personally God is claiming Israel as God's own. When we live a 10 Commandments-shaped life, faithfully obeying and staying true to our covenant relationship with God, we are God's prized possession, which God has claimed as God's own. I think that's hard for some of us to process. We spent the entire service last week pulling out all the stops to try and open up a space where we could hear from God just how deeply we are loved. And I think that there are a lot of people who struggle believing that they are that deeply loved by God. And maybe in part because the verse says, if you fully obey, or if you faithfully obey, and our instinct is to say, oh, but I haven't faithfully obeyed. God couldn't possibly love me and adore me and deeply and lovingly claim me as God's own, because God knows who I've been and God knows what I've done. And I'm sure God doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And that is just not true at all. You don't have to get perfect on the exam to get a gold star. I am not Krista's prized possession, assuming that I am. I'm not Krista's prized possession because I'm a perfect husband, and she is not my prized possession because she's a perfect wife. My kids are not my prized possession because they're perfect, and I'm, as a dad, am not their prized possession because I'm a perfect dad. And I am not a perfect pastor. And none of that matters. Because the reason that we are each other's prized possession is not because we do it perfectly, but because we are fundamentally committed to this covenant of love that we share with each other. That is the driving force. What God wants is not perfection, but direction. Now, I think there are some of us who have probably steered into the ditch on the other side of the road and said, well, I know God loves me, and I know God's grace, and I know God is forgiving, and I trust in all of that, so it doesn't matter how I live. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul says, should we, continue to sin just because God is so loving? He says, may it never be. That we know, God knows, God can see our commitment to faithfulness in our relationship with God by the way that we live. You cannot say, I'm disinterested in loving you as a friend and just trust that you're going to continue to love me as a friend. It doesn't work that way. But this is what God says. If we are committed to staying true in our covenant relationship of love with God by living a 10 Commandments shaped life, that we are God's prized possession. Now, why? What does that mean to be God's prized possession? What is it that God prizes so much? Well, it goes on to tell us at the end of verse 5 and into verse 6. It says, the whole earth belongs to me. You will be a kingdom of priests for me. The whole earth belongs to me. You will be a kingdom of priests for me. God says, if you live in covenant faithfulness of love, by living a 10 Commandments shaped life, the thing that I love about who you become is that you become a community of priests for the rest of the world. And what does that mean to be a community of priests? Well, what is it that a priest or a pastor does? What does it mean to be a priest or a pastor? A priest or pastor mediates between God and people in some functional way. And I say that kind of with a couple of caveats. Number one, the Bible says the only mediator we need is Jesus Christ, and that's true. But it is also true that there are people who play that role in a tangible way with skin on in our lives. And that priests and pastors are supposed to be the people that we can most count on to play that role. And I say that kind of theoretically because so many priests and pastors have been so bad at playing that role that people actually end up losing faith in God because of their interactions or the way they observe how people are being priests and pastors. If you bear the name of God, you represent God into the world, but you do that badly, why would anyone want to have anything to do with God? But here's what Moses is saying. If you will live in covenant faithfulness in a 10 Commandments shaped life, you will be priests for me in the world. You will be the people who draw close to me and bring the world into my presence. And you will be the people who draw close to the peoples of the world and bring my loving presence into a concrete expression in their lives. You will build the bridge between heaven and earth, between the sacred and the profane. You will be those who bridge the gap between God and people. What does that look like to play that role? Well, on the one hand, Priests are people who are set apart to draw close to God and to bring the world into God's presence. I think in a couple of ways, figuratively, to bring the world into God's presence in prayer, lifting up the world before God in prayer and praying that God's loving presence would invade the entire world, would flood the world. But I think there's a literal aspect to that too, literally bringing people who are not yet a part of the community into God's presence as we gather for worship, as we gather as community together, so that we can be people who accurately discern what God is like and point other people towards Jesus. We draw people into the presence of God. And simultaneously, we are people who bring the presence of God into the world. People who represent what God is like in concrete expression where the world can see it. People who live their lives to serve and to bless the world with the same faithfulness and compassion and justice with which God has loved us. To be people who, by our lives and our presence, point people to Jesus. God says if you live faithfully in covenant relationship of love, living a 10 Commandments kind of a life, you'll be my prized possession because you will become priests for the world, drawing people into God's presence and God's presence into the lives of people. But in order to do that, there's one more thing that has to be true. Back to Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 and 6, it says, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. In order to be priests, we have to be holy. What does that mean? Well, it means two things. The word holy, on the one hand, means to be set apart or to be singled out from all of the others as uniquely suitable for the purpose. I have about 2 or 3 dozen Bibles home. I'm not short on Bibles, and yet for this morning, I singled out this Bible. I set it apart from all the other ones as uniquely suitable for preaching Exodus chapter 19 this morning. It's to set apart as different or unique. And at the same time, it means to be set apart. It means to be sanctified, to be made usable because it conforms to the requirements to be used, right? If this Bible that I brought today, if the spine was broken and pages were falling out and Exodus was missing, it wouldn't be usable to me. If it was in Latin, it wouldn't be usable to me. If it was the Quran, it wouldn't be usable to me to preach the book of Exodus. This book is uniquely qualified. It's uniquely usable. It meets the standards that I have to be able to use it for my purposes. When God says, if you live a life in faithful covenant, a 10 Commandments shaped life, you will be holy. What he means is you'll be different than everybody else. We will put on display for the world a life and a way of being community together, a way of loving each other that the world doesn't see anywhere else. The world will see something different in us that makes us usable for God's purpose in the world. After the 10 Commandments, there are 3 or 4 chapters that we'll look at later in the spring, where Moses describes some specific instructions that help describe what it looks like to live out the 10 Commandments in day-to-day life. And these commandments in that section, they cover every aspect of life: social welfare and employment law and disability rights. They talk about how we speak about each other, about health and safety, about race equality, about integrity in the way that we conduct our business, about neighborly relationships. They describe in every area of life what it looks like to be holy, to be different than the rest of the world in a way that puts God's character on display. Because if we are holy, then we are qualified to be God's priests in the world, those who mediate, bringing the presence of God into the world and bringing the world into the presence of God so that everyone can experience God's love. And to the degree that we play that role, we are God's prized possession among all the peoples, the apple of God's eye. Because as God's holy people, playing the role of priests for the world, we can bring the entire world into relationship of love with God. If, friends, as we get into the 10 Commandments next week, if we are committed to living a 10 Commandment-shaped life as an act of faithfulness in relationship of love to God, we will be different in a way that will have an impact on the rest of the world that will bring joy to the heart of God. And that is who we most truly are. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for Jesus, who is your prized possession, your beloved Son, as the New Testament says over and over again. We thank you for Jesus, who is the high priest, the chief priest, the one who leads all of the rest of us and shows us what it looks like to bring the world into your presence and your presence into the world. We thank you for Jesus, who is the Holy One that you sent into the world, the one who most perfectly puts on display what your love looks like and what it looks like to be a genuine human being. And we thank you that because of Jesus, we can become people who live in faithfulness to loving covenant with you by living a 10 Commandments-shaped life that brings joy to your heart. Would you do that in us, we pray. Amen.
You decided love would cross the great divide when you came down to be the perfect sacrifice. But you've been crying, your heart's breaking for the lost, to tell the story of a God of love. And you have given everything we need, and telling us that we're your hands and feet, not just to believe, but you're calling us to action, not just with our words, but investing with our treasures, not just here at home, but to bring it to the nations. You have said the greatest among these are those who give their lives for those in need. We were made to share the love that we've received, to bring it to the streets and meet the simplest needs. 'Cause someone's crying, someone's breaking down inside, to see the story of a God of love. You have given everything we need, telling us that we're your hands and feet, not just to believe, but you're calling us to action, not just with our words, but investing with our treasures, not just here at home, but to bring it to the nations. For you have said the greatest among these are those who give their lives for those in need. of those who give their lives for those in need.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope that you felt inspired and challenged by our time together. Now, we know that for what we have heard today to become reality in our daily lives, it's going to take more than this 1 hour a week we spend together. It requires a moment-by-moment, 7 days a week commitment to practicing the way of peace and the way of Jesus. That's why we provide a host of ways to continue to lean into God's presence while we are away from each other. As always, you can click the Practice This Week button below the player for daily spiritual exercises to continue to develop the muscles we have started building today. And if it helps, you can also opt into the spiritual practices notifications on our app to get those helpful reminders every morning as you start your day. As our time together ends, we are going to put some questions on the screen. So, if you're watching with others, they can serve as great conversation starters, but they can also be a great way of processing and personalizing what you've heard today on your own. And if you'd like a more personal conversation with someone about anything that's going on in your life, we invite you to reach out to our location pastors who will follow up with you privately. Simply go to southridgechurch.ca/contact. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for joining us and have a great week.